Oh, this is going to be a weird one,
Yeah.
listeners.
I could feel it already.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the weirdest thing, I'm going to do the thing where I start talking about the thing before we do the intro. So let's do the intro first, and then we'll talk about the thing, and then we'll do the thing, and then we won't do the thing, and then we'll never speak of it again right here on the KickAss.
The weirdest part is that we tried to do this thing while not really doing the thing. Like, this isn't the thing that we normally do. Even when we try to do the thing before we do the intro and then do a thing afterwards, like there was no contrived attempt at being humorous, which we're really, really guilty of. We're just going to do the thing. Yeah. And the best part is, as we just talked about like a minute or two ago, we're probably going to do more setting up the thing than actually doing the thing.
I almost kind of don't want to even explain what the thing is just because this bit is working so well for us.
No, it's
right
not.
Now.
It's really not.
Explanations aren't essential. Explanations are for sucks.
What are we even doing here? Oh, so we'll at least explain that this is one of our Rush episodes, Rush being short, of course, for Mount Rushmore, where we will give you our top 4 blahs, whatever that blah is, whatever that category is. We then, the three of us, decide on the top 4 blah that we can all agree on. And that becomes our Fairly KickAss top 4 blah of the episode. Today's topic, which you would think would make things easier, and it really didn't, I promise it didn't, is the top 4 artists that defined a decade. We are going to be doing other decades, possibly as rushes, possibly as other episode types. We might mix it up a bit. But the first decade that we're tackling is artists that defined the 1960s. There is a caveat, a very large caveat to that the three of us had talked about beforehand, because when I say artists that define the 60s, there is one artist that comes to both of your minds, that comes to anyone who's listening's minds. And in that case, either we consider them disqualified or we consider this a 5 artist rush and they just become one of the top 5. And that, of course, is the Beatles.
Yeah. You can't disqualify them because if you're thinking about like artists that defined the 60s, they're the obvious answer, right? So, I mean, they even said, here comes the sun. They're the sun. And then everybody else is a planet or a moon or some strange space object caught in their gravity. So, yeah, they're just too obvious, too historically unavoidable to rank against anybody else that could be up for contention here. So yeah, we'll give them the opening acknowledgement, say that's where they belong, and then we can argue about the rest of it.
I like that. Yeah. With the Beatles kind of taken out of the mix, and Jay, I'll kind of ask you this first, like as I was kind of intimating during the intro, this became like a very, what seems on paper as a fairly easy exercise, at least compared to some of the shit we put ourselves through over the years. Was it that easy as it seemed, or did it end up becoming more of a challenge? What do you think?
I would say this is not one of the more challenging ones that we've done. It was fairly easy for me, but the problem was every artist that you think of leads you to another artist that you need to think of. So for me, it was like daisy chaining one after the other. Like, oh, that led me to this, and that led me to this, and that led me to this. So it became, the challenge for me was trying to decide what was the definition of the 60s. Not so much coming up with artists that could define the 60s. I think we could have, 12 different answers among the three of us here, and all of us would be correct.
Easily.
And because of that, it's my opinion. I'm going with the ones that I like.
Dan, what about you? Same question. Easier than you expected? Harder? Pretty much dead on? What was your take on the whole exercise?
I think it's harder. I think it was harder to come up with a list that probably is going to be unique Jay didn't have that problem, obviously, and I think he's going to lead us on that case. But and there's also the problem that I was spending way too much time in my brain trying to discern. The 1960s seem like the origination point of so much of what we think of as modern music. And there are so many things that are rooted in artists, albums, songs, and movements between 1960 and 1970. And I went back and forth trying to figure out, is that the truth? And it is really that this decade the progenitor of everything that's come forward? Or has this been the nostalgia of the past 50 or 60 years of being told, hey, everything cool that you like started in the 60s, except for a couple things that you like probably started in the 50s, and then something you really like, but believe it or not, was first recorded in the 20s. So, like, is the 1960s kind of like the logjam, or is it just kind of what I say taught, but like no one is out here teaching necessarily pop music education. However, I would volunteer to run that class at like a 200 or 300 level.
I think I took that class.
Holy shit.
So they actually, now that you mentioned that,
yeah, I could tell you who taught it.
I was going to say, to do a little bit of backstory, Jay and I both went to the same institution of higher learning, Bowling Green State University, here in beautiful Bowling Green, Ohio. And we were, at least at the time that we were there, I don't know if this has changed, but at that time in the early 2000s, we were one of 2 schools in the country where you could major in pop culture studies. It fell under culture studies. And basically, you had decided that you were going to be a culture researcher, writer, and or teacher if you majored in pop culture studies. It was part of the American Culture Studies program, I believe. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that program is still there in some form. There is a massive pop culture library on campus that has so many things that are so many unique things that are just like, if you're a nerd, that is a pop culture museum, a fascinating place to spend the afternoon. The whole digress. Either way, I just realized I made an offhand comment and then like, wait, actually, there probably is somebody. It might be a master's level course by now.
Well, yeah, by now, maybe. When I did it, I took it. I minored in it.
Okay.
As an undergrad. It wasn't a master's level course. It was, I think you had to be a junior or something like that. Whatever. There was other, like English 112 or something was a prereq, but no, I definitely took pop music as a course.
I think by now, and maybe we put a pin in this idea, but I believe if anything, for the last 6 years, we have probably qualified to teach at least a basic level, if not an intermediate level class on pop music. We will eventually be able to do music composition. And at that point, look for that very soon in the feeds, FKA 101, 102, and 201. All things that you can audit for free with a simple click of the subscribe button. I'm teasing something. I'm promoting something we haven't even agreed to do yet, just so I can get in a like and subscribe. Now,
any university provosts or anything that wants to get in on this on the ground floor, let us know.
That's right.
Yeah, you're throwing this idea out. Meanwhile, I'm like, I know I have a circle of fifths back here somewhere. I just got to find it. And we're good. We're good.
I do have a master's degree. I can teach at the college level. It's fine.
There it is. Hit us up.
I all but dissertation.
I can also be here.
That all of that was to say that this might actually be more I found it difficult to try and narrow things down, and I'll be honest with you, I have one entry I'm pretty sure would be unique, and I will still have to fight for, because we're in that founders category for a lot of stuff. And the worst part is you say that, but also, to Jay's point, we can also come up with like 5 other artists who are doing similar things at the same time and just didn't click and just didn't get big enough to be considered in the academic conversations.
And I think that's where it was really interesting for me, especially considering like the legacy conversation. Like I struggled with this part quite a bit because I would think like, I feel like 3 of my 4 artists probably checked that quote unquote legacy box in spades, kind of checked that progenitor box in spades. One certainly did not. Not that that artist was unpopular or was not widely known, but certainly one that I had to think like, this artist certainly defined a decade, but I don't think really defined much after that. So I think it would be an interesting. I'm very curious to hear both of y'all's thoughts if this artist even hit your short list whatsoever. The other 3 I feel like are slam dunks, in as much as, like you said, there could be 12, 15, 20 slam dunks in this entire episode, and it's just going to be, in some cases, a bit of a coin flip to figure out who we go with and who we don't.
Yeah. Whew.
With all of that said, since I kind of teased it up, I'm happy to go ahead and throw that one out first.
Please do.
Yeah, please do.
So I kind of, as I approached this, and this was weirdly organic for me, considering that it did end up kind of being a sort of theme, but I broke the decade and the sound of the decade down into discrete parts. The first part that I'm going to cover is the one that's probably the most nebulous of the 4, and that's the vibe, the feeling, that certain, that indescribableness of like, this artist is of its time and here's why. Like that feeling is kind of why I went with my first artist. It was a sound that was extremely psychedelic, that was fairly bluesy, kind of chambery in some ways, especially in the earlier part of the 4 albums within the 1960s for this artist, and messy in all the right ways. Because while the Beatles may have been the soundtrack of the 1960s, as we already discussed, the Doors were the ambience and the music that you would hear in the hotel lobby and the elevator of a joint called the 1960s Inn. As I mentioned, 4 albums in the decade, with their 1967 self-titled debut sounding much more raw than the subsequent 3 releases. But don't be fooled. 1967's Strange Days, 68's Waiting for the Sun, and 69's The Soft Parade all perfectly capture the vibe of the decade, with each album becoming more melancholic, at least the middle 2, until the more upbeat Soft Parade kind of facilitates a more happy and less morose move into the 1970s. Yeah, the lyrics are weird. Sure. The 60s were a weird time. It fits. Jim Morrison wasn't winning any vocals awards, obviously. We all know that. But that's not what the band needed, and that's not what the time needed. What the time needed was the Doors, and it fit perfectly into the sound, the spirit, and the vibe of the 1960s.
My only argument against the Doors is not really my own. I've never been a fan. I've never been a fan of the Doors. I've caught a lot of flack for that. Cotton? That's not a word. I have caught a lot of flack for that. But I can quote Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Lester Bangs in the brilliant movie Almost Famous when he says, Jim Morrison is a drunken buffoon, not a poet. Give me the Guess Who have the courage to be drunken buffoons, which make them poetic.
I hate and love that in equal doses.
Oh, yeah. But I don't have any actual argument against the Doors in this category. I actually have them on my list as well, despite the fact that I don't really care for them myself.
I mean, they're there as well. And I think for that point that you were making, more so than anything else, is that the vibe of a certain segment of the 60s belongs to the Doors. There's something about that organ that just says 66 to 69.
Totally.
And it fits the vibe. And yes, Jim Morrison was not a great poet. He was the level of poet, the same level of poet as the stoner guy at the end of the dorm hallway that would, randomly come out reeking of weed, but have a sonnet to share on some huge discovery in the grand scheme of life that had just hit him when he couldn't catch the cough. And It sounds like I've done it. I'm running them down. I'm trying not to. It's hard not to. It is the vibe of all the negative stereotypes that went with the youth movement to eventually become the hippies, so to speak.
I could see that.
And again, I like certain. I'm a fan of certain songs. Musically, they did some interesting things. They do deserve a place of consideration. I think it with Jay though, not my favorite.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like there is some, I don't even want to say trope, but I guess I will around that sound and kind of the remembrance, the historical aspect of the mid to late 60s.
Right.
How much of that is realistic? I'd like to believe more than it seems. I'd like to believe that, there was a lot of that maybe was caricaturized over time, but at least that vibe, was still exactly as it was portrayed, if not obviously made to be much bigger and much larger than maybe it actually was. But who knows?
And I think to that point, I was going to say two things also. Points for giving the double bird to both Ed Sullivan and CBS when they performed on the show. But if you kind of think about it, and this might be something we can get into further, but if you make a movie about the 60s, a Doors song has to be on the soundtrack. It's sort of the same way, like you do not make a movie about the Vietnam War that doesn't have Fortunate Son somewhere on the soundtrack.
Mandatory, yeah.
Right.
Like those are the sounds of that time. And that's, I guess, what we're sort of looking for as well.
It's an interesting case, right? Like you could make so many arguments, and I hope that the other artists we talk about, at least some of them will have that sort of like, many arguments you can make for them, but also many arguments that kind of make you pump the brakes a bit, just for the sake of argument. I think it's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I think for me, the Doors were like that. They fit into that, like their definition of the 60s would be that dangerous, more like self-destructive or decadent side.
Certainly.
Of things,
for sure. And I mean, perhaps not the last band or not the last artist on the three of our lists that would fall into that motif.
No, absolutely. Dan, who do you got? Who are you pitching first?
I'm trying to figure out which sound of artist I want to go with. Let me go with the top side and see where how everybody feels about this, because this man has gone by a number of names over the course. Had gone over a number of names over the course of a 50-year career, which can see him having major influences, not just on the act of performing music in public, which is a very important thing to add into this, is that there were a lot of artists out there, and a lot of artists doing unique things, but only one artist who work on stage earned him the nicknames and earned him the credit of being Mr. Dynamite, the hardest working man in show business, the minister of new super heavy funk, the godfather of soul, also the king of soul, and also soul brother number one, James Brown. Most of my notes on James Brown were his nicknames because they took up the whole area on the page that I had allotted him. But when you look back and kind of see exactly what he did, obviously in soul, for a time where it was finally taking off in the beginning of the 60s, and a lot of the songs were staying with the artists that actually first performed them, which was a new thing in the early 60s, when people like Pat Boone didn't have bigger hits necessarily with soul songs. I'm never not going to let that go.
Nope, you shouldn't.
But also that he is, as his work evolved into funk and into R&B, then into dance, and then also being the basis for a lot of early sounds of hip hop and rap. Absolutely. Not to mention, and this is more so him as a modern band leader, so to speak, but not to mention the sheer number of tremendous musicians that were at one time a part of his band and touring. And just the amount of innovation that those artists, that those musicians would do with him on stage. If there is a guy that has brought more to what performing means in that era, I would love to be enlightened. I'm sure there is someone who's doing plenty of unique things. I'm sure we'll talk about somebody who had even more fiery performances throughout the decade to come. But a lot of it all starts from James Brown.
Yeah, no arguments. He's on my list too.
It's framed perfectly by kind of your lead into that, and just the discussion of legacy, the discussion of the genesis of a sound. Like, yeah, of course, like multiple sounds. I mean, let's not just keep it at one. I guess that's where it got difficult for me, because like this is the sound of a decade, but also would lead to the sound of far more than that. And I don't think that's a bad mark at all. I don't know that it's necessarily a positive, but I feel like it has to be, right? Like, I feel like that has to be a part of the conversation. How can it not be? This is my own internal monologue kind of firing back and forth.
I know that's the thing. Like, there's so many threads, and I was trying to remember exactly who had played that, because I always go back to when someone talks about how much like the bands did as well. I always go back to that break during Funky Drummer. You know it. You've heard it a million times. You probably don't know it was played by Clyde Stubblefield, which I didn't either, because I couldn't remember the man's name. And it's 20 seconds, and it had so much influence. Yeah. So much influence, especially as you got into the 80s.
I guess my question would be, and this is a loaded question, because how can the three of us answer this? But like, we can look back in 2026 and understand the impact of what James Brown brought to the table. And I feel like the answer is yes, but like, do you think that art, like crowds, that audiences, that fans in the 60s that were in the middle of this movement, of the middle of this moment rather, like, do you think they've thought the same thing? Like, wow, this is something that we're going to be talking about for years and decades to come.
I think 13 to 15% of the population absolutely feels that way.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the origin of the block party, man. Like, this is, I mean, the only note, so he's on my list, but the only note I wrote for him was he changed the rhythm of American music. But like you said, the hardest working man in music, and that includes the artists that worked for the music behind him, and that includes the people who showed up for all of those performances. It's like a machine built out of sweat and syncopation. Like, it absolutely, I don't know that in the moment when you think of the 1960s, like the two of the main things that pop out when you think of the music, well, one that when you think of the music is hippies, and then the other thing you think of culturally is the civil rights movement. And I absolutely feel like anybody who was involved in the civil rights movement was there and present and knew that this was powerful and knew that this was something that we were going to be talking about. I mean, say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. Like, that's like culturally relevant now as well as 60 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, that is the influence and the participation, you know, the very, I'm trying to think of a way to not make this seem like I'm underscoring it, or to make it seem like I'm underscoring it. He did a lot, obviously, for the civil rights movement, is what I'm trying to say very ineloquently. Yeah, and that certainly leads into it as well. So I mean, zero arguments. As much as it sounds like I'm arguing, I'm not at all. I'm more kind of dissecting, because it's a really, really interesting choice. But I don't think at all a bad choice.
No, we're going to struggle to narrow this down. We're going to have a problem.
Indeed. We are indeed. Yeah.
I don't think we're going to have many arguments against for any of these choices.
No.
Jade, will you give us our first argument against, or
no? Well, you know what? Hold on. Let me mix this up a little bit. I might get a little weird on us for a second, just in case you guys have better explanations for some of the other stuff. I will go with one of my weirder choices. It's still not that weird, which is important here. I'm going to say, I got two options. Okay. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to go with the Beach Boys.
Okay. And
the reason I'm going to go with the Beach Boys is because I feel like they had a story arc throughout the 1960s. So they defined the 60s musically by turning American pop into this dream of youth and sunshine and harmony, and then hidden sadness. So the early songs captured bright mythology of California culture, right? Surfing, cars, beaches, teenage freedom, becoming symbols of possibility, at least in the early part of the decade. But the greatest importance came when Brian Wilson pushed that sunny sound into something far more ambitious and emotionally complex with Pet Sounds. And they showed that pop music could be emotionally complex, right? Carefully arranged, deeply personal, artistically serious, but without losing beauty. So, I mean, we know the songs. Wouldn't It Be Nice? God Only Knows. Caroline, No. A lot of harmonies, orchestral textures, unusual studio ideas. He took a lot from the psychedelic acts that were around, but he started expressing longing and innocence and doubt and heartbreak, and it moved pop music from simple entertainment into something like the album as an art form. If not concept album, it's close. I would say they didn't just give like the image of endless summer, which is usually what we think of with the Beach Boys. It also revealed like the ache that comes with it.
Like they almost single-handedly like transformed the perception of pop music from a sugary cereal to a complete breakfast.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I like that that comparison actually a lot. The evolution, and it was, and you know, you think about it too. It was sort of that whole period where we were moving along from albums as a collection of nice songs that artists would put together, and then led by really the Beach Boys and the Beatles, starting to think of the album as a coherent piece from start to finish. And everyone points to Sgt. Pepper, and I know that's not the first concept album, and we can keep going back and arguing forth and there. What Smile would have done had it been released in its original form at the time it was made, and how much impact that would have been amazing. And I say that also having lost a nominee off my list for a lot of the same reason that you just expressed. The fun part, though, is also going back a little bit into the breakfast cereal points in their career and picking songs apart because of what Brian was able to do in the context that they built a box. Again, they were not the progenitors necessarily of surf rock, but they were the biggest and publicly did the most with it. So they built themselves a box, and then Brian Wilson came along and said, we're really good at this box. Now let me see exactly how much I can cram into this box and still sound like us at the end of the day and still get that point. Good Vibrations is the perfect example of that as a track.
Yeah. That song basically, they turned, and the Beatles did this a lot too. Like, again, we're going to have those comparisons all day if we want to.
Yeah.
But the studio becomes an instrument. On those
sure.
On tracks like that one. Like it full on uses their talents as individuals that then in the studio they can work and rework and whatever until it becomes the perfect product, and they came up with the perfect product.
For sure.
And I was going to say, and I was going to add into not to mention that you also have that defining sound, not just musically, but vocally, because many have tried, but no harmonies sound like Beach Boys harmonies.
Correct. They're
the cleanest, brightest, Beach Boysiest harmonies that like they are self-referential. They have to be. Because like you said, there's no comparison. There's no like, oh, I mean, the Beach Boys were fine, but listen to this. No, that's like they are one of one.
In the 60s. We're not talking about Kokomo.
Yeah, we're not. No one, and the problem, do you have like a Ring camera somewhere in this office? Because as you bring that point up, I was trying to remember the name of the record they did right after, which was an absolute bomb, being Summer in Paradise.
Yeah.
It was the one, it was the one where John Stamos covered Forever.
I might fuck with that, actually.
No.
Because he covered Alone, and it didn't sound terrible.
If you've heard Forever, you know what a sweet and gentle song that is.
Yeah.
And then you put it in the hands of Stamos, who made it a Bryan Adams song.
At best.
Right?
Fuck with that. I'm the problem here. I realize that.
Who made it a song Bryan Adams would go, yeah, let's not do that. Kick that down to Mellencamp.
There you go. Kick that down to Melon. Well, Cougar.
Yeah. Good distinction.
Yes.
Oh, so did I hear you correctly in that, Dan? You said like that is also on yours?
Yes, actually. I'm going to be honest with you. When we started this, I had two names immediately come to mind, and the Beach Boys was one of them.
Wow. I thought that was one of the odder choices that I made. Apparently not.
No,
it is not in my top 4. It is in fact number 5 on my list.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
all right.
Not weird at all. I promise.
Okay, cool. Well, is your next toss out going to be weird for us?
I don't think it's going to be weird, but I don't think it's going to play. And I struggled with this one a lot too. I feel like this was the one that I was like, if there was anyone that I would question myself on, not even the Doors. I felt pretty good about my reason and rationale for the Doors. I didn't feel as good about this artist, even though I do feel that the artist deserves to be in that pantheon, but I've questioned it and I will continue to question it. You know, as I kind of talked about and alluded to, like there's a theme going on here. All of my picks are essentially different sides of that same 1960s coin. We talked about the vibe already, and now we're going to talk about the lyrics that defined the 1960s, and particularly the messaging within the lyrics that define the 1960s. This narrows it down quite a bit. It doesn't completely narrow it down. There are a few different areas that I could go, and a few different areas I almost did go, to be perfectly honest. But I eventually did center on Bob Dylan because I feel that there's a volume at play, specifically 9 albums between his 1962 self-titled debut and 1969's Nashville Skyline, which as I sit here is like, I don't know, maybe like 40 minutes in that direction or so. Bob, it was and is an artist that really, with his lyrics, defined maybe not the carefree side of the 60s, maybe not necessarily the hippie culture, but certainly characterized and portrayed a lot of the issues and problems and ills of the time in a way that wasn't just trying to make everything better. It's not as bad as it looks. It wasn't that vibe at all. And it also, wasn't just the, everything's terrible and we're all going to shit kind of vibe. It was just very matter of fact. It was very accessible. And I feel like it had just knowing that these lyrics were out there and people were hearing some of the things that they were feeling, especially in the absence of the internet, which it probably is a net positive, let's be realistic. But, they could hear all of these things that maybe they weren't so comfortable to share with family and friends, but this guy was telling the things that they were feeling. And I think that says a lot. Certainly not a voice that was isolated to the 1960s, but I feel that he still belongs in the conversation for everything that he touched on within the decade itself.
Yeah, I feel like at least most of his super important stuff came out of the 60s.
Totally.
And I would say, again, he's on my larger list. And all I wrote for him was that he was the decade's conscience.
I like that.
Which he's the poet, right? Like I firmly believe that the majority of his songs were better when performed by somebody else.
I think he would agree with that. Personally.
But I don't mean that to say that it's not still entirely him. His poetry is what made those songs important, even when he wasn't the one that performed them. So I think, I want to say he had something to say, which was new in the world of popular music, right? Like we had the songsters and the songwriters in the 50s, the folk, whatever you want to call it, the protest music, that kind of stuff. But he really really amped up what was important about protest music, and he revived folk music in a popular setting and basically became or helped decide what music could carry intellectually. So I think he was crucial.
I do want to quickly say that I do not want to withdraw my choice. I do want to withdraw my explanation and replace it with yours. If it can be written as such. Thank you.
Consider it done, I guess. I like that I keep losing things off my list, off my main list. That's nice and fun that way. Because I don't have to add, I don't know how much I could possibly add, except to kind of summate the whole thing, that the whole point that you guys are making about the importance of what him being essentially a cultural awakening in the field of pop music and furthering the awakening of folk music, with the one line that the Nobel Prize Committee used in 2016 to explain why they awarded him the prize that year for literature. And it was for, quote, having created new poetic expressions within the great American song tradition.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't explain exactly why he deserved to be nominated, I don't know what else you want.
On the nose. 1,000%.
Yeah. Like I said, he didn't land in my top 4, but yes, of course.
So that brings us then, I think, to Jay, right?
Yeah, I think. Well, so we've got 3 of Dan's taken care of, so I'll throw another one out there.
Right.
And this one for me is the first one I thought of. It's the easiest one for me to say yes, absolutely, and that's Jimi Hendrix. He didn't need the whole decade to be definitive, right? He showed up late and immediately made everyone else's guitar playing sound like it came from a previous civilization. He embodied the psych explosion, the expansion of the electric guitar, the collapse of the blues into noise and space, and the idea that rock could be cosmic and violent and beautiful and technically impossible. His playing was rooted in blues, but he pushed so far beyond that, using feedback and distortion and wah and studio experimentation. And his sound was entirely new. I don't think I have to name any specific songs, but the ones that come immediately to mind would be things like Purple Haze, Little Wing, and Voodoo Child, to sort of span the collection, right? And he sort of captured what I would think of as like the wild contradictions of the 1960s. So the freedom and violence, optimism, chaos, beauty and destruction. And his performances, to bring it around to that same field as James Brown, his performances at Monterey Pop and Woodstock made him more than a guitarist. They made him a symbol of the restless energy of the 1960s. Everything he did made music louder and stranger and freer and just impossible to ignore.
Yeah, larger than the guitar that he was playing, larger than the sound that came out of it. It is incredible to think that this is the same instrument, albeit not quite played in the same way, but largely the same instrument that other artists had at their employ prior to Jimmy, and other artists have certainly had at their employ post Jimmy, but they never sounded like that.
Correct.
Truly, I mean, one of one is kind of overused in our society. I've certainly been guilty of it. I may have said it today for all I know, but this is one where I would absolutely stand up and say, like, yeah, this is maybe one of the absolute truest examples of one of one, at least in music history. Not a surprise that this also takes one off of my list as well.
Yeah. And like for me, this was the obvious one because his death in 1970 meant that for the 1960s, like that's it. Like we only had him right there.
That's it.
I'll bring, much like Zach, you just ran across with, I think it was the Beach Boys. But if I get 5, Jimmy was number 5. And to bring that whole thing full circle on that, exactly to continue your Dylan point, Dylan put out All Along the Watchtower, didn't even chart as a single. Jimmy put out Owl on the Watchtower as a top 20 hit. So,
Yeah.
And Dylan himself says he's preferred Jimmy's version over his own. Which what greater,
right.
fucking compliment.
Better compliment for that one. I can't think of like I that's the problem. I can't think of anything else to add. There's so much of his work that honestly you just kind of have to sit and listen and be in awe of the power coming out of his amps.
Yeah, great pick. Jesus, what are we gonna do?
I feel like we've got three gimmies at the moment. So let's see where we go from there. Should I just throw out another one since y'all are pretty well done?
Please. Yeah, I've only got one more. You've got a few, so let us have it by all means.
I've only got the one more, and you're not gonna. And it's not getting on the thing. I know that for a fact after this.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw out the one that I'm pretty sure is not going to be on either of your lists. Not confident at the moment, but I'm pretty sure. So we've talked about the rock and the surf. Now let's talk about the underground, the urban, the unsettling, which for me, that's the Velvet Underground. A lot of the era's pop music was associated with optimism and psychedelia and dreams of social transformation. And they explored alienation and addiction and sexuality and boredom, life in the margins, essentially. Their music sounded like New York City after midnight. Strange, cool, abrasive, beautiful, dangerous. I would call out songs like Heroin and I'm Waiting for the Man, Venus in Furs, All Tomorrow's Parties. It pushed rock music toward art and noise and minimalism and honesty. Brutal honesty. I think, their connection to Andy Warhol and his factory made them a larger part of pop art and film and fashion and avant-garde expressionism, but they were not the sound of the 1960s mainstream for sure. They were the sound of everything that was happening underneath it. So for me, they defined the decade by revealing the shadows. They proved that rock music could be intellectual and confrontational and deeply strange.
Brutally honest, I think, of everything you said. And everything you said, obviously, very, very correct and very, very valid. But I think that is what really set them apart for the time. Because this shit was happening. They weren't just talking about some fairy tale land where this was just make believe. Like, this was the culture. This was a large part of the culture. And they were, one of the few bands that were able to actually say, like, hey, this is what we're really doing out there. This is what, like you said, what's really happening in New York, after midnight. Like, none of that was made up. None of that was, maybe some of it was sensationalized, but I have a feeling it really wasn't. I have a feeling it was just, straight shot for shot from, what the culture really was. And it was cool that someone was out there kind of being the scribe to all of that, and also sounded pretty damn cool in the meantime as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot culturally that can be said about that, honestly, of them being the sound in the way that there were so many groups that you can point to and say this sound and this band represents the swinging 60s in London. And while was this happening to everyone in London in the 1960s? Absolutely not. But this is what it's known for. And on the opposite end of the scale, New York was in the process, especially in the late 60s, heading into the 1970s, in the process of crumbling. And they were, in the way that Bob Dylan was describing modern urban life poetically in the early 60s with a more philosophical mindset, the underground were doing more of that avant-garde, as you mentioned, illuminating the shadows. Like, this is really what's happening to people in our city. It's not good, but this is the story that aren't being told. Not just to mention just three names from that group and what they would go do forward between Lou Reed and John Cale and Sterling Morrison.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot there. And they're probably not the first band that comes to most people's mind when you kind of define the decade, and that's a shame.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like for me, I honestly don't love all their music. I feel like their music is powerful, but it is, as I pointed out, deeply weird, especially for the time. But anybody who's been listening to this podcast for any length of time knows that I live in the spaces where things need to be novel, things need to be different, things need to be abrasive, or it has to tweak something in order for it to really burrow its way into my collection and what I want to listen to on a regular basis. And while I don't love everything the Underground did, they were the anti-hippie band of the 60s. Their stuff was abrasive and literary and bleak, and they influenced everything that came after that. So without them, I wouldn't be able to listen to anything from Ipecac Records. And I have gratitude toward the Underground.
Are you trying to tell me with a straight face that the guy that put out Metal Machine Music was doing weird abrasive stuff early in his career too? Mind blown, man. Mind blown.
Could not imagine. Oh shit! What a pull! Yeah, that they definitely ended up on my shorter list. I had to look down like my ranking. It was number 11, so not that far down, truthfully, at all.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by that.
that they're on the list at all, or that they weren't higher.
No, that they're on the list at all for you.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, what you said, just kind of the three of us, like, and I say this as a compliment, I promise, because it's informed a lot of my listening. Like, I feel like you are the one that is the most liminal of the three of us. And I promise that is a compliment, because it is such a beautiful thing to get out of the tunnel vision, out of the mainstream, out of this, blinders, and see that there's so much beauty out there just on either side of the thing that so many people just miss. So thank you for that. This might get cut, but that is a heartfelt thank you for opening my eyes.
I appreciate that. I really do, because honestly, I don't think anybody's ever told me that before. That's so sweet. But also, I need it the other way around too, because otherwise I will live in the margins and I will never hear what's going on culturally and what's important in the mainstream. So I need that as well. So thank you.
FKA, a team effort.
And I echo what Zach said, because I have the opposite from what you're saying, is having to constantly remind me that it's okay to go looking in the margins and reminding that you're going to find something that does appeal to you. Just be willing to put some time in. And I cannot tell you the length of the playlist called albums I need to catch up on that I have gone through, thanks to the stuff that you particularly, Zach, of course, as well, because it's in the course of doing all this show, I completely miss it by putting those blinders on. That has to be middle of the road to be able to do this. So thank you both as well.
Guessing recently it's Geese and Kneecap.
Oh, definitely Kneecap. Oh my God. I got to find the movie now too.
Yeah. Okay.
Do we try to get us back on track?
We got that.
Now that little hug fest is over, let's get back into what we're talking about.
I get us back on track.
Damn, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Yeah, I get us back on track with the entry that's not going to make it, because technically not an artist. Technically,
I know exactly who you're going to say.
Oh, do you? Oh, okay. Let me see if you're right.
I do. I'm gonna type it into the group chat.
Oh, okay.
So don't look at that until you're done. Okay.
All right. So you do that. It helps. I have notifications off, so I won't see it pop up on my screen. But we have said so much about the origination of sounds and artists that have created what we think of as the sound of the 60s. And unfortunately, in all of this conversation, there is one area that we haven't touched yet that is most definitely not only just the sound of the 60s, but a very close sound to 2/3 of this podcast. And that, of course, is right up the road in Detroit, Rock City. And it is that was done by Motown Records. And there's a lot of places that would that would credit any number of artists out of there. And it's so hard to do, because the talent pool on that label at that time was immense. So maybe you just give it to Berry Gordy, because he was running the place. The creators that made the sounds that you associate with groups like the Supremes, like the Four Tops, like the Isley Brothers, Marvin Gaye, Martha and the Vandellas, and throughout for an insane 5 or 6 year period where they were writers and producers and composers and constructed what we think of as the Motown sound. Brian Holland, Lamont Dozier, and Eddie Holland Jr. deserve some sort of recognition. The best way to explain why is really just to give you a whole list of stuff, names of songs that you know that form like the backbone of what you would think of as the Motown sound, if you will. And let me see how fast I can do this as well, because I wrote a lot. And the problem is I wrote a lot, which means I wrote a lot. And if you know me, my writing is awful.
Known this for decades.
It's not changed. I printed it so I had a better shot at it. If it was cursive, I was screwed. So, Heat Wave, Where Did Our Love Go? Baby, I Need Your Lovin', Baby Love, Come See About Me, How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You. Stop in the Name of Love, Nowhere to Run, Back in My Arms Again, I Can't Help Myself. That's the Sugar Pie Honey Bunch. It's the same old song, This Heart of Mine, Reach Out and I'll Be There, and one of my own personal favorites, Bernadette. Like,
yeah,
that output to basically defines what you think of, what we think of as the Motown sound, and what that sound would then become throughout its various permutations going forward once they moved to LA and things got in there. Like, the only person at this point and going forward to there that was kind of left to do his own thing without Holland, Dozier, Holland was Stevie Wonder. If it tells you the level of talent that was like, okay, you're allowed to work outside of the system. Everybody else, you're working with these guys, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I want to agree with you. I do. I thought of that as well. Like, but I went at it a different way. So like when I tried to think of something that would make the Motown sound fit this list, I wanted to say the Temptations. Well, but you can't say the Temptations without talking about Motown. And, I want to say the Supremes. Oh, but you can't talk about the Supremes without talking about Motown. And that is the truth, no matter which one of those artists, Gladys Knight, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, it doesn't matter. Stevie Wonder you can talk about without talking about Motown, but more in the 70s.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, Stevie Wonder's the one.
But more in the 70s.
That might be the
right.
one.
And honestly, that's why he's the only one that you named that wasn't on my short list, because he was Motown, and it wasn't until you get to 74 and he starts having his classic period to where he is really truly becomes Stevie Wonder, when all the genius starts coming through.
Yeah. So I don't know. I want to include it, but I don't know how. We'd be breaking a rule, which we do all the time anyway, but
exactly. I had to do it once.
Fair enough.
I knew it wasn't going to get through, but I at least had to bring them up.
Well, I do have to say that makes my fourth selection rather interesting, Dan.
Oh boy.
Because we have had, for my theme, just to recap, we've had the overall vibe of the 60s. We've had the lyrics of the 60s. We've had the musician or the, instrument of the 60s, of course, that being Jimi Hendrix's guitar. And the one piece we haven't had yet is the vocals of the 60s. And there were so many different directions that I thought to go down. And the one direction that I could think of that I feel was really the strongest vocal and perhaps the most iconic, truly vocal. I don't know why I'm putting it in air quotes. It is exactly what I say it is. It is the vocal individually, collectively as a group. Eddie McLaughlin Travis, Barbara Martin, Cindy Birdsong, Florence Ballard, and of course, Mary Wilson and Diana Ross. I did choose the Supremes as my fourth choice, while knowing that there is the Motown machine at play, knowing that that is a large part of their success, but also knowing that Berry Gordy wasn't singing the songs. You know what I mean? And I think that they're at least, I don't know that I'm going to necessarily fight for the Supremes here, but I think there at least needs to be a acknowledgement of that. And granted, when I say the Supremes, that also could have been the various and sundry other acts that you mentioned for the same reasons. In fact, for me, it was a toss-up between the Supremes and the Temptations, specifically in that vocal category. Obviously, none of that happens without Motown behind it, without Hitsville behind it. So I don't think at all that your choice, even though it did color outside the lines, I don't think at all that it was a bad choice, because it is so iconic. That is you don't get a sound named after you if you're not doing something right. And obviously they were doing plenty right back then.
Yeah. I don't disagree with anything you said. I have notes on the Supremes and on the Temptations, but ultimately decided not to go that direction because of the Motown sound. I will say the Supremes and the Temptations together, like they represent the more like the polished, like the Hit Factory. That's what you think of. And it absolutely defines the decade. But which one do you go with? And I couldn't decide, so I didn't.
Yeah.
That's fair. That is to also admit, and we will put this caveat, this disclaimer, like an hour into the show. In no way does this show tell the full stories anywhere near that of the artists we're speaking about. And the problem with this is that even though we're going to put this down as our Rushmore, we can make like 6 Rushmores for this decade, and every single one of them works. We do Rushmores for by sound, by vibe. Like, despite trying to be definitive, there is no possible way to be.
No, we've never gone for actual things. That's not what we're about.
That's fair.
That's no fun.
But that being said, the interesting part is that we actually have a good amount of consensus.
Yeah, well, I have one more to kick out.
Okay, then let's get that out and see if we can make it 4 for 4.
Well,
and we don't argue.
I don't think there'll be any argument about this one.
Fair.
But also, I don't see it making the cut because it's the one that I don't actually particularly like them as a band. It's the only one of the run that I don't ever listen to if I can help it, with very few song exceptions. There's a few, but if the Beatles are the perfect pop revolution, then the Rolling Stones are the bad news version. They were heavily influenced by the American blues revolution that had happened, in previous decades, but they had the swagger and the rebelliousness, and they took the sounds of artists like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley, and they shaped it into something louder and more confrontational that the youth culture in the 60s could latch onto. And, there's stuff in the later 60s, Satisfaction and Paint It Black and Jumpin' Jack Flash and all that kind of stuff. Like, it was the darker side. It was frustration. It was desire, all those kinds of things. And I think Mick and Keith and Brian and Charlie, like, as much as I don't want to listen to them, it is hard not to like look back at what they did. They gave the 60s a weird rhythm and a riff and a grin. They like bit down on it. I only want to listen to Mother's Little Helper and Gimme Shelter, though.
I think I agree with everything you said, up to and including the part of like not necessarily fucking with the Stones,
right,
but also acknowledging their impact and their impact. I guess we'll keep it at that. Their impact on the sound of the decade. I mean,
yeah,
like you said, it's like the yin and yang to the Beatles. It's the antithesis, maybe in a lot of ways, to the Beatles.
Yeah, and it's like, just because we threw out the Beatles as like the obvious answer, it doesn't mean we got to kick out all of the British invasion. We could have mentioned a whole bunch of other people that came in that door as well, but I don't think any of them mean as much as the Beatles and the Stones. Like, I think, we learned that with the not so great movie Quadrophenia.
Yeah, there definitely was if that was a Mount Rushmore, there would be 2 on the list. We wouldn't even have to do the other 2.
Yeah.
I can't disagree. I think it is a case where I will fuck with the greatest hits disc.
Yeah, but not all at once. You got to split that up with other
all
stuff.
at once. Like, I own 40 licks, but I can't imagine listening to both discs back to back.
Right.
They fall into to culturally, they do fall, I think, into that Velvet Underground category, because they are going to be the flagship of a movement throughout the 60s where pop culture gets grittier. They're going to be the front runner on the musical side. We're getting way out of the pressed and starched 50s and into the 60s, where all the sounds that were grittier or dirtier or not considered desirable enough, taking the roots of that and moving it up to the forefront of pop culture, just like the underground would do later in the decade. They were the band you listened to in the mid 60s to piss your parents off, in the same way that Nirvana was the band that a lot of millennials got introduced to and listened to piss their parents off in the 90s. It's not the progenitor, but definitely the sound that your parents aren't gonna like until they play Satisfaction on a 3-song loop on every classic rock station everywhere. And then your parents are like, yeah, of course, we were adults in the 60s. Come on.
Yeah.
At least it's not Stairway. Jesus.
Stairway.
All right. So I think that lands us, as Dan, you were about to point out, we do have quite a bit of overlap here.
Yes.
From Beach Boys showing up on 2 and almost 3 of our lists, Hendrix showing up on 2 and almost 3 of our lists, Bob Dylan showing up on 2 and almost 3 of our lists. So,
yep, that's those 3 I got.
Those 3, I feel like that's a launch, right?
Yeah.
So do we cop out and just say the Beatles are the 4th, or do we argue about the next one?
No, we argue about the next one because we're going to have it, but we try to figure this out quickly. So, like, for example, I know we'll throw out Holland Dozier Holland as the nominee.
By the way, did you look back and see that I had written Barry Gordy in the
Yes, I did.
Chat?
I did look back. I was like, so close, so almost right there.
Yeah.
But I went one step further down the rabbit hole on you.
Did.
Which was awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so who wants to take their next one off the list?
Man, I feel like I have to take the Supremes off just because of what you said, Dan, that it's like it is picking one in a barrel. Not at all meant to be an insult to the Supremes, but just there were so many. Like, how does one choose?
How do we do that? Exactly.
Yeah. So I think I would be okay with drawing that one for sure.
And I'm going to be more controversial to like the listeners here. Like, I think the listeners would be more interested in keeping them on the list, but I would remove the Stones.
I like it. No arguments here.
So now we're down to the Doors, James Brown, and the Underground.
What a list. What a 3-artist list. Holy shit. Out of the 3 of those, I feel like, I mean, the Doors was the pick that I made, but the Velvet Underground was the only other one that was on my list. I didn't have James Brown on my list, and perhaps that was a miss on my part, even on my short list. But yeah, rules is rules, I guess.
The Doors weren't on. They were on my list. Actually, all 3 of. I mean, James Brown was on my list too. But I had a long list. Does that count?
Of course, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we're splitting hairs here, right? Because we've got the psychedelic, we've got the American rhythm, and we've got underground. So I don't know how to. They're 3 completely different animals here,
and 3 completely different people who brought them to the table too. So it's not even like one of us brought 2 of them and can just take one out in kind.
Exactly.
This is a first. It's a bit of a stalemate. Well, I think that both of y'all made a good point with the Doors kind of being of their time, but not necessarily as iconic as the Underground, and certainly not as influential as James Brown. And since I know we're only supposed to be talking about the 60s in a vacuum, but I think now we're kind of like at the tiebreaker phase. So I feel like these are kind of like the extra criteria that we would look at. And comparing the Doors to either of those artists, I don't think they compare very favorably. So I am hereby withdrawing them from consideration.
All right.
Well, if you're withdrawing your own, I'm going to throw you into the lamplight here and say, which one of the other ones would you go with? Because here's the thing, like you're conceding the election. So who are you throwing your support behind?
It's like the movie Swing State.
Right.
Yes.
Well, looking at who we have already, Dylan, Hendrix, the Beach Boys, I feel like there is, and overall on this list as well, just without having Motown, like you don't have that funk aspect. You don't have that R&B aspect. So I think just in the name of being as comprehensive as possible, I think that, the Underground, I'm not saying the Underground and Jimi Hendrix are the same band by any stretch or the same artist, but certainly they live in a similar plane. Whereas James Brown, I feel like brings something different to the table that none of the others bring.
I can't disagree with that at all, and wouldn't even try.
Works for me. It's better than my suggestion of just let's make it a tie.
Well, that's what we do during re-ranks, but we can't do that for a Rushmore. Otherwise, we may as well have just thrown Motown in there.
That's very true. That's the thing. So what we will declare is that for tonight, because I'm sure this could change with a whole different set of things, that we will declare our Rush defining the decade of the 1960s to be Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, the Beach Boys, and James Brown. And there's and I'd like to quickly, because we've talked a lot, dive into our short lists.
Yes.
And I'd like to dive into that short list because there is one glaring omission that no one brought up that we are going to get shit for, and deservedly so. Because truly 5B, Aretha Franklin, nowhere to be heard on that list.
She was on my longer list, but
I also have a lot of the, I'll just try to run quickly because I have a lot of the groups we already talked about. The Supremes are obviously there. Ray Charles is there. The Temptations were there. Otis Redding, not getting a mention, interesting there. Marvin Gaye also there.
He was my,
I think you got
Otis was my number 5.
Oh, there you go. You got to talk about the Who. You got to talk about the very beginning of that and add in Chubby Checker, but you also got to talk about groups like Cream and Gladys Knight and the Pips and the Isley Brothers, but also 2 bands making their name later on. And also entry that we only got them for a short time. CCR, as I mentioned, Fortunate Son is in every movie about that damn war. And On the Line, because most of what they'd gotten known for would happen in the 70s, but they have connections with Dylan, so you got to bring up the band.
Yeah.
That might be the biggest stretch on my short, quote unquote, short list.
I don't hate anything you said. Even any of those that you brought up, I would have put them in like strong contention, honestly.
The only one of the things you said that's not on my list at all, because everybody else was, except, well, I guess the band wasn't either. So I guess there's 2. So the band, and then also I left Cream off the list for more personal reasons.
Same.
It's fine.
Hard same.
I don't disagree with the reasoning there. But then there's so many other things. Like, now that I said about it, Sam Cooke probably should have been somewhere in here too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Then that's the problem we're going to run into every time we do one of these episodes is we're going to set a list and then go, but there's also, here's 50 other names that probably we could have talked about.
Yep. Because I also had Aretha on mine, everybody else that we talked about just now. And then I had Simon and Garfunkel and the Byrds, Sly and the Family Stone, Marvin Gaye by himself, not as a member of Motown, right. The Kinks, Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane, and then 2 that I knew weren't going to be on anybody else's list, but I thought I'd throw them out here just for fun, was the Mamas and the Papas, and then Grateful Dead.
Yeah, again, there are so many right answers to this question and so few wrong answers.
Right.
And I don't think I've heard a wrong answer yet. Yeah, Janis is a personal favorite of mine and was very strongly in contention for that vocals area for me.
She just had such a smaller catalog than everybody else.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, the only other ones that I don't think y'all touched on were, I know that it was only the first 2 albums, but I feel like another one that would kind of be like the audience pick would be Zeppelin, of course, for Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. I think, those albums being what they were, I wouldn't put them in contention personally, but I feel like a lot of people would. So I threw them on my short list based on that. And then one that I didn't think would get through if I put it through, but I feel like this artist absolutely deserved to be at least an honorable mention, and that was John Coltrane.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But would we have slotted him over James Brown? Probably not. So
no. Exactly.
Like I feel like we landed where we should have been. If I was just doing this as a personal list, it would have been more like Hendrix, the Beach Boys, and then throw in the Who. That was my number 6, and the Kinks, because I love them.
Also, if that was our list, like if that was our show list, I'd be okay with that.
Totally okay with that too.
Truly.
God, yeah.
So much concurrence for once. I think all 3 of us had the right answer here, which is awesome. I think we killed it.
Yeah. Cool.
But it doesn't really matter what we think, to be fair.
Then why didn't we just do this?
It really was like an hour and 20 minutes of wasted time for us. It doesn't matter.
It's all for funsies, I guess.
Exactly. Of course, listeners, we are alluding to the fact that you are the ones that matter, your thoughts that matter. Who did we miss? I mean, we talked about so many artists, but there were so many other artists that we didn't even scratch the surface of. Some that we just didn't have time to talk about, some that maybe we just didn't think of at all in this context. So let us know the ones that we did talk about, our official show list, if it's right on the money, if there are ones that you would slot in or slot out, and if there are ones that we just completely missed out of hand altogether. At Fairly KickAss, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, fairlyKickAss.com, fairlyKickAss@gmail.com. And of course, your only source for the Fairly KickAss podcast is literally wherever you can find it. Just search for Fairly KickAss on your podcast provider of choice. We should pop right up. If we don't, please drop us a line, let us know, and we will make sure to get that rectified so you can get the next hour and 20 minutes of useless music stuff delivered right to your ears every Friday.
We do have an exclusive deal with literally everybody.
It's pretty sweet, right? Like it's just good business.
It works out really well.
We are rolling in the zeros of dollars that we're making from this podcast.
But that's not the point. The point is the friends that we made along the way. But we were friends before. We should just go. We should really just go.